There's only about 6 albums on this list, by the way, and 4 of them are in the thumbnail. You know, I'm not really the type of person to rate albums on like a number scale. I think it's kind of a silly thing to do. Just kind of like rating art in general is kind of weird. Reviewing it is perfectly fine though. But every now and then I do come across an album that makes me think like, wow, this really is something that I would call a 10 out of 10. A 10 out of 10 to me is probably something that is like super unique and it's just like completely mesmerizing. It sounds like unlike anything I've ever heard before. It keeps my attention all the way through. There's no tracks that ever feel dull. It doesn't really matter how influential the album is. It doesn't really matter the cultural significance of the album. It's just like, if I enjoy the album, then I'm gonna call it a 10 out of 10 probably. I think a good album for us to start off with, so you kind of get what I'm talking about here, is Crumbling by Mid-Air Thief. I mean, I still remember the very first time that I heard the song These Chains on this album. I was very high and I was outside at night. Immediately when I first heard that guitar come in, I just decided to start laying down on the rocks and staring up at the stars, and it was a beautiful time. There's really no way to perfectly describe this album. This album is just kind of, I mean, it's folktronica, you know, there's a lot of mixtures of acoustic instruments and electronic instruments on this album, and it's very layered. You know, I don't really speak Korean, so I can't understand most of the lyrics on this album, of course. Naturally, I only have the music to focus on, and it is so layered to the point where I've listened to this thing so many times, and even now I listen to it again and I still find new things in the instrumentation. This album is truly mesmerizing from front to back. There's just so many unique sounds, and it's just such a unique style of music, and I haven't been able to find anything like it before. I'm honestly curious if anyone has any other albums that are kind of like this, then I would love to hear it. I've already made a full video about Mid-Air Thief on this channel. It's probably how some of you guys found me, so I'm not gonna dive into it any more than that. It's a 10 out of 10 album for sure. The next album I want to talk about is One Word Extinguisher by Prefuse 73. This is a kind of like a IDM slash glitch hop album, and this album, I mean, once again, 10 out of 10, unlike anything I've ever heard before in my entire life. I'd honestly describe this album as a glitchy fever dream sort of deal, you know? It's like if you're dreaming, but like your brain is like glitching out or something like that. That's kind of how I describe it. Just the production techniques on this thing are just like insane. Even some of Prefuse's other work does not sound like as good as this album. Like, I truly feel like this is his his opus, if you will. And I will. Some of the times, like, the beats themselves aren't that intricate, but I just think the way that like the instrumentals on this album are designed is what makes this thing so interesting to listen to, and that's really all it is interesting. Every track is like kind of short, so nothing really overstays their welcome, which I think is also helps the album a lot. Very quickly you're kind of getting through this album because it's a 23 track album, but like every track kind of it serves a purpose, you know. And also like the transition, like the flow of this album is really well done. It's honestly a really incredible album. If you have the time to listen to it, I highly recommend it, especially if you're into like IDM electronic type music. I got into this album when I was first getting into the IDM genre. I still can't even find anything that sounds like this album. Like, it is absolutely incredible, so go give it a listen. We're gonna talk about Cortex, Troupeau, bleu. I don't know, it's French or something. This is an album that I just recently got into a couple months ago, and I actually just recently decided that it was going to be a 10 out of 10 the other day. So this might be my naivety speaking, because I haven't listened to much jazz or jazz funk or anything like that, but this album is unlike anything I've ever heard before in my life. This album is a straight up vibe. Everything about this album works so well with each other. The instrumentation, the vocals, god damn those vocals, man. The vocals are really the highlight of this album. The lead singer has this beautiful falsetto, but also honestly the instrumentation is a huge highlight on this album. If you're ever cooking a meal for yourself, or maybe a friend, a significant other, throw this album on and you're gonna feel like a 5-star chef for sure. Like, you don't even have to be cooking anything complicated. You can just be boiling pasta. That store-bought pasta with the store-bought sauce is not gonna feel store-bought when you're listening to this album, okay? It's gonna feel homemade. That's how good this album is, okay? It makes you feel like you're making homemade pasta. It's like a French album, so you're not gonna really understand the lyrics. I mean, unless you can speak French, actually. My bad, okay? I assume that you couldn't speak French, but maybe you can. Yeah, give this an album. Also, if anyone has anything that sounds like this album, throw it at me. You know, I want to listen to more of this type of stuff. Maybe this album isn't a 10 out of 10. Maybe I'm going to find more stuff that sounds like this, and I'm going to be like, you know what, maybe this album isn't as unique as I thought it was. Candy Claws, 2 Airships, Exploder Falls. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think I've said it before. Actually, maybe I haven't said this. But this is the better Candy Claws album, okay? This is the better Candy Claws album for sure. Sears and Calypso's, you know, it's good, but this album, there's just something about it that makes me go, yeah, I get this. You know, it's 2 long instrumental tracks, and it feels like the soundtrack to a Mario Kart game, but everything's fucked up, okay? Like the screen is like glitching out or something like that. You're like in star mode the entire time. The track is like just full of, you know, like boosters, so like there's no slowing down. That's what this album feels like. The sound of it is really cool because there's like this acoustic guitar that has like a bunch of overdrive on it, so that adds a very unique aspect to the album. The bass is just super crunchy, and like and just the soundscapes of this album is absolutely incredible. If you listen to this album, if you're doing anything basically listen to this album if you're doing anything. I like to listen to it while I'm driving. I think it's a really fun album to listen to while driving. Be aware though, you might very easily go past the speed limit if you're listening to this thing while driving. I'm not saying that I've done that, okay? I'm just saying it's a big possibility that when you're listening to this thing, you're gonna put your pedal to the metal and just go, because that's how the song sounds. The song sounds like you're doing 120 down a freeway. Like I said, not saying I do that. I don't do that, okay? I'm just saying. We're gonna talk about Deceit by This Heat. This album was written back in the olden days. You know, this album sounds so ahead of its time. I forgot when it came out. I was gonna look it up, but I forgot to look it up. It sounds super fresh. Basically, the context of the album is when they were writing this album, they basically, since it was in the middle of the Cold War, and in that time, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but we didn't have these things called cell phones that could tell us anything that we want at any moment. So they were basically super paranoid the entire time, thinking that they're gonna get nuked or something, because, you know, that's what the Cold War was about, I think. I'm not a historian, so don't quote me on that. So these guys were just in extreme anxiety about basically death. So that was basically the energy of the album. That's the energy of the album. It's basically, we're gonna die, we're gonna get nuked, holy shit, let's make an album about it. The instrumentals definitely reflect that a lot. I mean, I think also the lyrics are really good because there's a lot of lyricism in here about war and like consumerism and stuff like that. It is honestly really interesting to listen to. I think it's an album that everyone should listen to at some point in their life. Not everyone's gonna enjoy it though. This is one of those albums that would actually like scare the hoes. Like if you played this on the first date, you were not getting a second date. I'm gonna tell you that right now. I'm not speaking from experience. I'm just saying, not everyone's gonna vibe with this thing, and that's okay. But everyone should listen to this thing at some point in their life. This album is so cool, man. Give this album a listen. Go into it with an open mind. It's a 10 out of 10 in my book. And then the last album that I would call a 10 out of 10 is Fishmans. I forgot the order of the numbers. 19, 12, 28. I think there's a 19, I think there's a 12, and I definitely know that there's a 28. This is an album that I actually don't listen to a lot. I probably only heard this album in full probably about 3 or 4 times in my life, because it's one of those albums that you don't really want to listen to a lot, because it would almost kind of ruin the magic. At least in my opinion, I feel like it would ruin the magic if I listened to this thing too many times. This is a live album. It's one of the only live albums that I've actually listened to in full, but it doesn't really feel like a live album. It feels more of just like a time capsule, like a moment in time that was just kind of captured. It was I think the last performance before the lead singer's death, Senji Sato, rest in peace. First off, the set list for this performance, absolutely beautiful, man. So many songs from different points of the Fishmans discography showing up on here, and that's really cool to see. The performances themselves, absolutely incredible. You really can close your eyes and really just picture yourself there in the crowd. I've only had one like physical body reaction to listening to music, and it happened during this album. Right when I finished Long Season, the 45-minute rendition of Long Season. Fucking perfect, beautiful. I will never forget the feeling that I had in my body as I was laying in bed and the song finished, and like I was just chilling there in silence, and my body had tingles. Okay, tingles. The album's 2 hours long, you know, because it's a full live show. Super worth it. Even if you're not into Fishmans, might as well give this a listen. Or actually, you know what? No, fuck that. Okay, if you're not into Fishmans, listen to Fishmans, hear their entire discography, and then your reward is getting to listen to this album. That's how I did it. That's how you need to do it, okay? Because it will make the experience way better, okay? 10 out of 10 album, even though I've only heard it like 4 times. Those are pretty much all my 10 out of 10s. To Pimp a Butterfly might also be on there, but I need some more time to digest that album. So I'm going to talk about that album next week.